Hello everyone, this is Steve Yoder. Welcome to Week 8 in Legal Studies 246, Legal Environment of Business, here at the UAB Collat School of Business in the fall of 2016. Thank you, all of you who submitted an answer to the extra credit question for last week on intellectual property. The correct answer here is that the dispute between Pepperidge Farm and Trader Joe's was over the trademark that Pepperidge Farm said it had for its Milano cookies, the shape of the bag and the shape of the cookies themselves. No extra credit opportunity this week, but I am giving you a free peek at a question that will be in the question pool for the second exam on criminal law and other chapters that are covered in that second exam. There is a question in the question pool for the second exam on this case before the United States Supreme Court, Edward Strife versus State of Utah. This was a situation in which Edward Strife was walking down the street. It happened to be near what the police knew as a house where there were drug deals going on. He hadn't gone into that house. He wasn't coming out of that house. He was just walking down the street, but the police stopped him and found that he in fact had illegal drugs on him, and he was accused of a crime. He tried to have that evidence of the drugs excluded on the grounds that the police lacked a search warrant, and you can Google that case and find out what happened. Here is the learning module for week 8. We're covering two separate topics. First, international business transactions, and second, an introduction to the formation of contracts, both important topics for you as business professionals. Of course, there are chapters in the textbook to read, Chapter 10 on international law and Chapter 12, we're skipping Chapter 11 for now, Chapter 12 on contract formation. There are, of course, class slides and some narrated slides, and as you can see here, there are a few short articles and at least one short video for you to look at as well. And you can see that there is a quiz for Module 8 on international law, as well as one on contract formation. The best example of international law would be treaties. We'll be looking at that, and please look in the learning module for a video on a treaty, the North American Free Trade Agreement, that's being criticized right now in our presidential debate. There are three principles of international law that really are not written down in a treaty, but are common law principles that courts will follow. Here they are: comity, act of state, and sovereign immunity. There's a case in your book involving the act of state doctrine. Little known fact, Citgo, the oil company, gasoline company, is actually owned by the country of Venezuela, and the question of whether the act of state doctrine applies to its businesses is what was the subject of this case. We'll also be taking a quick look at a topic that's important if you're going to do business internationally, and that is, how do you get paid? In what currency do you get paid? Then we move on to contract law and start with how you form a contract. There's a checklist for this as well that we'll be using, and you'll remember that we used a checklist in tort law. Take a look at the NBC News video in this learning module for the importance of a checklist in medicine. We'll be looking at a few very important terms that you should know the meaning of for later on in our discussion of contract law: bilateral versus unilateral contract. And here are three very important words, all starting with the letter V: valid, voidable, and void. Our goal with a contract is to have a valid agreement, one that a court would enforce if you ask the court to do that. Part of forming a contract is that there has to be an offer that has been accepted. This is not an extra credit question, but look at this very recent example from the news in 2016. Kanye West raised a question of contract law when he wondered aloud whether
his record would ever be on Apple. Or note that the next thing due on Sunday night, October 23 at 11:59 p.m. is for you to post on the VoiceThread discussion board about the ethics of downloading music without paying for it, and there are 2 quizzes from Module 7.